Welcome to the deep dive. Looks like someone's been doing some serious thinking about education.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, you sent us a whole bunch of texts on educational philosophy.
that's right. Lots to unpack there.
All right, well, let's dive in. We're about to go on a journey through the foundations of learning, all the way from ancient Greece to modern
I
India.
love it.
I have a feeling this is going to lead to some serious aha moments.
I think so, too. You ready to maybe question everything you thought you knew about education?
Absolutely. I'm always up for a good challenge.
All right, well, let's do it. What's fascinating about these sources is they remind us that philosophy isn't just some, abstract academic thing.
Right.
It's about wrestling with questions that have real-world consequences for how we learn, live, and teach.
I love that. So before we get into specific philosophies, let's just start with the basics.
Okay.
What is philosophy, really? We all know it's more than just dusty old books, but what does it actually mean to philosophize?
It's a great question. It's almost like asking, what is an operating system? You don't see it, but it's running everything in the background, right?
Right.
Philosophy is kind of like that for our lives.
Yeah.
It's about examining those big questions of reality, knowledge, and value. The stuff that we grapple at every single day, even if we don't realize it.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture, but can you give me a real-world example?
Yeah. One of your sources had a definition from Aristippus that really stuck with me.
Okay.
He said that philosophy is the ability to feel at ease in any society.
Wow.
Think about that. What if philosophy could actually give you the tools to navigate any social situation, to understand different perspectives,
Yeah.
and connect with people on a deeper level?
Now that would be superpower.
Right.
I'm starting to see why this deep dive is so important.
Uh-huh.
So how do we actually do philosophy? Where do we even begin to tackle these big questions?
Well, that's where those three main branches of philosophy come in: metaphysics, epistemology, and axiology.
Okay.
These are like the pillars holding up the entire structure of philosophical thought.
All right, break it down for me. What are these pillars all about, and what do they have to do with education?
Okay, let's start with metaphysics. This is where things get really existential. It's all about exploring the nature of reality itself.
Okay.
So is it just the physical world we can see and touch, or is there something more? What about things like consciousness, the soul, the universe?
Right.
What's the underlying reality behind it all?
Wow, okay, that is deep. I can see how these questions would be relevant to education. Can you give me a more concrete example of how this plays out?
Yeah, for sure. Think about the different views within metaphysics, like monism, dualism, and pluralism.
Okay.
So monism says that there's only one kind of ultimate reality.
Okay.
Dualism argues for two, like mind and matter.
Uh-huh.
And pluralism suggests there are many different kinds of real things. Now imagine how those different views of reality would shape what we teach and how we teach it.
Right.
A dualistic approach might lead to a strict separation between physical education and intellectual learning. While a more holistic approach, influenced by monism or pluralism, might see those two as intertwined and inseparable.
That's a great example. So it's not just abstract theorizing.
Wow.
It's about how we actually understand the world and how that impacts the way we approach learning and teaching.
Absolutely.
Okay. What about the second pillar, epistemology?
All right. Epistemology is all about knowledge.
Okay.
It asks questions like, how do we know what we know?
Yeah.
What are the sources of knowledge? And how reliable are they?
Okay.
Is it all about our senses? Or do reason, intuition, even revelation play a role?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to make this real for you, think about a simple science experiment.
Okay.
Is the knowledge we gain purely from what we observe?
Uh-huh.
Or are pre-existing ideas shaping our understanding? This gets into the limits of empiricism, the idea that knowledge comes solely from sensory experience.
Yeah.
Different philosophical schools have different answers to these questions, leading to very different approaches to teaching methods and curriculum design. A teacher who emphasizes empirical knowledge might prioritize hands-on experiments and direct observation,
Okay.
while a teacher who believes reason plays a key role might emphasize abstract concepts and logical argumentation.
Okay. Now that's starting to click for me. So the way we approach knowledge itself is a philosophical question
It is.
with very real consequences for how we teach and learn.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
All right, on to the final pillar, axiology. What's that all about?
Axiology gets to the heart of values.
Okay.
What's truly valuable in life? Is it beauty, goodness, justice? And how do we cultivate these values in ourselves and others?
Right.
Axiology is where philosophy meets ethics and aesthetics, fields that are incredibly important when we're talking about the goals of education.
So axiology is basically asking, what kind of people do we want to raise? And what kind of society do we want to create?
You got it. It's about understanding what we value most and how those values shape our educational choices. Think about the curriculum we design, the way we assess student learning, even the way we interact with students in the classroom. All of these are influenced by our underlying values.
So how do those values connect back to the other branches of philosophy that we talked about, like metaphysics and epistemology?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Our views on reality and knowledge directly inform our values and how we prioritize them.
Okay.
For example, if you believe in a purely material reality, you might prioritize teaching practical skills and scientific knowledge over things like artistic expression or spiritual development.
Okay.
But if you believe in a spiritual dimension to reality, you might value those aspects of learning more highly.
This is blowing my mind. It's like philosophy is this hidden web connecting everything, our beliefs about the world, how we know things, what we value, and how we approach education itself.
It's true. And that's why it's so important to understand these philosophical foundations. They're not just abstract ideas. They're shaping our educational systems and practices, often without us even realizing it.
So knowing all of this, how do specific philosophies like idealism or realism actually play out in the classroom? I'm ready to dive into some concrete examples.
Okay, let's do it. Let's start with idealism. It's this really fascinating idea that reality is ultimately mental or spiritual.
Okay.
And it goes all the way back to Plato and his theory of forms.
Okay, hold on. Can you remind me what Plato's forms are all about?
Yeah, sure. Imagine a perfect circle.
Okay.
You can draw a circle on a piece of paper,
Uh-huh.
but it'll never be perfectly round, right?
Right.
Plato believed that the perfect circle exists in this realm of forms.
Uh-huh.
It's like a blueprint or an ideal version of everything.
Okay.
And he argued that these forms are more real than the physical objects we see around us because they're eternal and unchanging.
So in idealism, it's all about ideas, concepts, and these perfect forms that exist in a realm beyond the physical world.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Got it. So how does this play out in education?
Well, for idealists, education isn't just about filling students' heads with facts and figures. It's about cultivating their minds and characters.
Okay.
It's about helping them connect with those perfect forms to develop their reasoning abilities and moral compass.
So it's like uncovering hidden knowledge and potential within each student.
Exactly. And that's why idealists often emphasize humanities subjects like literature, history, and philosophy. These subjects help students grapple with big ideas, explore different perspectives, and develop their critical thinking skills.
This is making me think of those teachers who are just super passionate about ideas.
Yes.
And who inspire their students to think deeply about the world. It's definitely a philosophy that values wisdom and virtue. So what about realism? How does that contrast with idealism?
Realism takes a very different approach. It flips the script and says that the physical world is the primary reality.
Okay.
This means knowledge comes from our senses, from scientific inquiry, from observing and measuring the world around us.
So no more perfect forms.
Not for realists.
Yeah.
They're all about what we can see, touch, and test.
Okay.
In a realist classroom, you'll see a lot of hands-on learning, experiments, and a focus on objective facts and skills that are grounded in the real world.
That makes sense. So while idealists might have students reading Plato and debating the nature of beauty, realists might have them dissecting frogs and building robots.
I like it.
Both valid approaches, just coming from different philosophical foundations. What other educational philosophies are out there, and how do they play out in the classroom?
Well, there's pragmatism, which centers on the idea that truth is what works.
Okay.
It's all about practical consequences and problem solving.
So if it works, it's true.
Pretty much.
That sounds very practical, almost like a scientific approach to philosophy itself.
You could say that. Pragmatists love experimenting, testing ideas in the real world, and seeing what actually makes a difference. Think project-based learning, internships, real-world applications. Those are all straight out of the pragmatist playbook.
It sounds like pragmatism is all about bridging the gap between theory and practice
It is.
and making learning relevant to students' lives.
That's the goal. Pragmatists believe that education should prepare students to be active engaged citizens who can solve real-world problems.
This is so fascinating. Okay, what other philosophies do we need to explore to really get a handle on this?
Well, next up, we have existentialism, which can feel a little intense, but it's super relevant to education.
Okay.
It focuses on individual freedom, choice, and the search for meaning in a world that often feels absurd.
Okay, I can see how that could be a bit heavy, but also incredibly freeing.
Right.
How does existentialism translate into an educational approach?
It's about empowering students to think for themselves, to question everything, and to create their own values and meaning. Imagine a classroom where there are no right or wrong answers,
Right.
where students are encouraged to explore their own unique perspectives and challenge the status quo.
So instead of memorizing facts, they're grappling with big questions and defining their own purpose.
Exactly. Think of open-ended art projects, philosophical debates, creative writing assignments, anything that encourages self-discovery and authentic expression.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about teaching. I'm starting to see how these philosophies aren't just abstract ideas.
Right.
They're frameworks for understanding the learning process and for creating meaningful educational experiences. What else do we need to add to our philosophical toolkit?
Let's explore naturalism. This philosophy has roots in ancient Greece and emphasizes the importance of the natural world.
So back to nature, what does that mean for education?
Think nature walks, hands-on science experiments, learning that's tailored to a child's developmental stage. Naturalism is all about recognizing the interconnectedness of humans and the natural world and using that as a foundation for learning.
So it's about fostering curiosity, observation, and a deep appreciation for the natural world.
Yes.
I can see how that would be a valuable foundation for learning, especially in today's technology-driven world. What about the final philosophy on our list?
The last one we'll unpack is Reconstructionism. This philosophy is all about using education as a tool for social change.
So it's about more than just individual learning.
It is.
It's about transforming society.
Exactly. Reconstructionists believe that education has the power to address social injustices, promote equality, and create a more sustainable future. Imagine classrooms that are buzzing with discussions about social issues, where students are engaged in service learning projects, and where they're empowered to become agents of change.
This is inspiring. It sounds like Reconstructionism is about channeling that youthful idealism and energy towards creating a better world.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that education isn't just about acquiring knowledge. It's about using that knowledge to make a positive impact on the world.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. From ancient Greek philosophers to modern social movements, it's amazing to see how these different philosophies shape the way we think about education. But I have a feeling we've only scratched the surface. What else can we uncover from these texts to really understand the depths of educational philosophy?
That's a great question. We've laid the groundwork, but there's still so many fascinating concepts to explore. Let's dive deeper into some specific ideas from your sources that really capture the heart of this philosophical journey.
I'm ready. Bring on the aha moments. You know, listening to you talk about all these different philosophies, it's making me think of them as tools in a toolbox.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's like there's no single right tool for every job.
Right.
It all depends on what you're trying to build, the materials you're working with, the context of the situation.
And just like a skilled craftsperson, a thoughtful educator needs a diverse set of tools in their toolbox.
Exactly. So it's not about choosing one philosophy and sticking with it rigidly. It's about understanding the strengths and limitations of each approach and knowing which tool to use when.
And that requires being adaptable, reflective, and open to new ideas. It's about being responsive to the needs of our students and the demands of the ever-changing educational landscape.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about in terms of my own teaching practice. I'm starting to see the philosophy behind everything, from lesson planning to classroom management to assessment.
It's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
What are some of the ideas that are resonating most with you?
Well, I'm really intrigued by the concept of integral education that we touched on earlier.
Okay.
It's that holistic approach developed by Sri Aurobindo, encompassing the physical, vital, mental, psychic, and spiritual aspects of a person.
It's a beautiful and expansive vision of what education could be.
It feels aspirational, but I think it's important to have those big, inspiring goals, you know, those North Stars that guide us towards something more meaningful and fulfilling in education.
Absolutely. It's about pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible and recognizing the full potential of every student.
But to be honest, I'm still a bit unclear on what those five aspects actually mean in a practical educational context. Can you break those down for me?
Of course, the physical aspect is pretty straightforward. It's about developing the body's strength, health, and coordination through things like physical education, movement, hands-on activities.
Okay.
The mental aspect focuses on cultivating intellectual skills like critical thinking, problem-solving, creativity.
Uh-huh.
But the vital aspect is where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Okay.
What exactly is the vital aspect?
Think of it as the life force energy, the
Okay.
enthusiasm, the willpower, the drive that fuels our actions and passions.
Okay.
It's about nurturing a student's sense of purpose, their curiosity, their love of learning.
So it's not just about intellectual understanding.
Right.
It's about cultivating that inner spark, that zest for life and learning.
Precisely. And that vital energy is essential for students to thrive in all areas of their lives. Now, the psychic aspect deals with developing intuition, emotional intelligence, and the ability to connect with oneself and others on a deeper level.
So it's about going beyond the purely rational and tapping into those subtler realms of awareness and empathy.
Exactly. And finally, the spiritual aspect isn't necessarily about religion. It's about fostering a sense of meaning, purpose, and connection to something larger than oneself.
It sounds like integral education is about weaving all of these aspects together, recognizing that education is about nurturing the whole person, not just their minds.
It's a holistic vision. And while it might seem idealistic, it offers a powerful framework for creating truly transformative educational experiences.
I'm also really drawn to the pragmatist emphasis on learning by doing. It just makes so much sense to me, both from a practical and a neurological standpoint.
It's about connecting theory and practice, making learning relevant to students' lives. Pragmatism recognizes that knowledge is best acquired through experimentation and application.
And it aligns perfectly with what we know about how the brain learns best. Instead of passively absorbing information, students are actively engaged making connections and solving problems. That's how deep learning happens.
One thing I've been reflecting on lately is how important it is for educators to have a strong philosophical foundation, regardless of the specific philosophy they embrace.
It's like having a compass that guides our decisions and actions in the classroom, helping us navigate the complexities of teaching and learning.
Exactly. A solid philosophical foundation helps us make sense of the ever-changing world of education. It provides a framework for understanding our role as educators, the purpose of education, and the nature of learning itself.
It's about grounding ourselves in our core values and beliefs so that we can make conscious, intentional choices in the classroom, even when faced with challenging situations.
It also helps us articulate our vision for education and communicate it effectively to others, whether it's to our students' colleagues, parents, or the wider community.
So it's not just about what happens in the classroom.
Right.
It's about understanding the bigger picture of education and its role in society.
You know, one of the greatest gifts of philosophy is that it teaches us to think for ourselves. It's about questioning assumptions, challenging the status quo, and being open to new possibilities.
It's about cultivating that critical, inquiring mind that isn't satisfied with easy answers or dogma.
And that's a gift that we can pass on to our students.
By creating learning environments that foster curiosity, critical thinking, and a love of learning for its own sake, it's about empowering students to become lifelong learners who are equipped to navigate the complexities of the 21st century.
Now, before we move on to our final segment, I want to circle back to those Eastern influences on educational philosophy that you were so curious about.
Yes, I'm excited to explore those in more depth. The texts you shared on Indian philosophy were particularly fascinating.
One concept that really stood out to me is the emphasis on holistic development in Indian educational thought. It's a perspective that goes beyond just developing the intellect.
So it's about nurturing the whole person, recognizing that we're not just thinking beings,
Right.
but also emotional, physical, and spiritual beings.
Exactly. And this holistic vision is beautifully reflected in the concept of the four Purusharthas, which we touched on briefly earlier: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha.
Can you remind me what those are all about?
Sure. Dharma refers to living a righteous and ethical life, fulfilling one's duty and purpose.
Okay.
Artha is about pursuing material prosperity and security, but in a way that aligns with Dharma.
Okay.
Kama represents the fulfillment of desires and the enjoyment of life's pleasures, again, in a responsible and balanced way.
Okay.
And finally, moksha is about achieving liberation from the cycle of suffering and rebirth, realizing our true nature.
It's a framework that encompasses all aspects of human experience, and it shows how education can play a role in helping individuals live a more balanced and meaningful life. But how do these ancient concepts translate into a modern educational context?
Think about how the pursuit of Dharma can inform ethical decision-making in a world that's increasingly complex and technology-driven.
Right.
How do we prepare students to navigate issues like social media ethics, artificial intelligence, and the impact of technology on our lives?
That's a powerful connection. It's taking an ancient concept and applying it to some of the most pressing challenges of our time. What about the other Purusharthas? How can they guide our approach to education today?
The concept of Artha can help us think about how we prepare students for the workforce of the future.
Okay.
It's not just about equipping them with specific skills.
Right.
It's about fostering a sense of purpose and meaning in their work, helping them find careers that align with their values and contribute to the greater good.
And how can we bring karma into the classroom? Isn't that about pleasure and desire?
It is, but it's not about indulging every whim. It's about cultivating a healthy relationship with desire, finding joy and fulfillment in learning, and fostering a sense of creativity and passion in our students.
I love that. It's about recognizing that learning can be pleasurable, that it can spark our curiosity and ignite our imaginations. What about moksha? It seems like that concept might be the furthest removed from a traditional educational setting.
It might seem that way, but think about how the concept of moksha can inspire a lifelong love of learning. It's about recognizing that knowledge and understanding are never-ending pursuits.
It's about moving beyond the limitations of the ego and embracing a more expansive view of ourselves and the world.
Exactly. It's about fostering that sense of wonder, that thirst for knowledge that transcends the boundaries of the classroom and extends throughout a person's entire life.
These connections are so powerful. It's amazing to see how these ancient Indian philosophies can still provide guidance and inspiration for educators today. What else can we learn from the Eastern philosophical tradition that can inform our approach to education?
You also shared some texts on key Indian thinkers who have shaped educational philosophy. Let's start with Swami Vivekananda. He was a powerful advocate for self-reliance character development and the idea that education should empower individuals to reach their full potential.
I remember reading about his belief that education should be more than just acquiring knowledge. It should be about developing the whole person physically, mentally, and spiritually.
Exactly. He emphasized the importance of building strong character, fostering self-confidence, and cultivating a sense of service to others. He saw education as a tool for both individual and societal transformation.
That resonates deeply with me. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of our own well-being with the well-being of others and the world around us.
Next, we have Rabindranath Tagore, a poet, philosopher, and educator who founded Visvaharati University, an institution that embodies his vision of a holistic and global education.
Tagore's ideas about education were so ahead of their time. He emphasized the importance of freedom, creativity, a connection to nature, and a global perspective, all things that are still so relevant today.
He believed that education should nurture the imagination, encourage critical thinking, and foster a deep appreciation for the interconnectedness of all cultures.
It's about recognizing that learning is not confined to the walls of a classroom, but extends to the world around us, to nature, to art, to different cultures and perspectives.
Now let's talk about Mahatma Gandhi. He's best known for his philosophy of nonviolence, but he also had a profound impact on education.
I remember reading about his vision for basic education, which emphasized practical skills, social responsibility, and moral development. He believed that education should empower individuals to become self-sufficient and contribute to the betterment of their communities.
It was a vision rooted in social justice, recognizing that education should be accessible to all and that it should be a tool for uplifting individuals and communities alike.
And finally, we have Sri Aurobindo, whose concept of integral education we discussed earlier. Can you tell me more about his philosophical background and how it influenced his approach to education?
Sri Aurobindo was a philosopher, yogi, and spiritual teacher who believed in the evolution of consciousness. He saw education as a key driver of that evolution, a process of unfolding our full potential as human beings.
So it's about recognizing that we're not just static beings.
Right.
We're capable of growth, transformation, and realizing higher levels of consciousness.
Exactly. And that's why his approach to education was so holistic, encompassing all aspects of the person: physical, vital, mental, psychic, and spiritual.
Wow, what an incredible journey we've taken through the world of educational philosophy. We've explored ancient Greek thought, modern Western perspectives, and the rich traditions of Indian philosophy. I'm starting to see connections everywhere, and I'm feeling inspired to rethink my own approach to teaching.
It's wonderful to hear. And before we wrap up this segment, I want to touch on one more concept that came up in your readings. The idea that philosophy is not just about finding answers, but about asking the right questions.
That's such an important point. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can do is step back, question our assumptions, and be open to new possibilities.
It's about cultivating that spirit of inquiry, that intellectual humility that allows us to keep learning and growing throughout our lives.
That's what makes philosophy such a powerful tool for both educators and students. It's about embracing the journey of learning, not just the destination.
And it's about recognizing that there are many paths to knowledge and understanding. What's important is to keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
I'm particularly fascinated by those Eastern influences we discussed, especially the Indian philosophical concepts. It's like a whole new world of educational wisdom has opened up to me.
Yeah, they offer such rich insights,
Mm.
into holistic development, the importance of the teacher-student relationship, and the interconnectedness of all things.
As we've been talking about all these different philosophies, I've been struck by the idea that they're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Right.
It's not like we have to choose one and stick with it rigidly.
That's a great observation. In fact, I think the most effective educators are those who can draw from a variety of philosophical perspectives,
Yeah.
finding the wisdom and insights that resonate with them and adapting them to their own unique contexts.
It's like we're creating our own personal philosophy of education, a blend of ideas and practices that reflect our deepest values and beliefs about learning and teaching.
Exactly. And that personal philosophy will continue to evolve as we learn, grow, and engage with new ideas and experiences.
So it's not about finding one right answer. It's about being open to the richness and diversity of philosophical thought and finding what works best for us and our students.
And that requires ongoing reflection, critical thinking, and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions. It's a lifelong journey of learning and growth.
One thing I'm wondering about is how to actually put these philosophical insights into practice. It's one thing to understand the theories, but how do we translate them into real-world actions in the classroom?
That's a great question, and there's no easy answer. It's a process of experimentation, reflection, and adaptation. It starts with becoming more aware of our own beliefs and values and how they shape our teaching decisions. Then we can start to explore different approaches and practices that align with our philosophical foundation.
So it's about taking those big ideas and finding ways to ground them in the everyday realities of the classroom.
Exactly. For example, if you're drawn to the pragmatist emphasis on learning by doing race, you might start incorporating more project-based learning, hands-on activities, and real-world applications into your lessons.
And if you're inspired by the idealist focus on character development, you might create opportunities for students to engage in ethical discussions, explore different perspectives, and develop their moral compass.
It's about finding ways to make those philosophies come alive in your teaching, to create learning experiences that are both meaningful and engaging for your students.
This deep dive has definitely sparked a fire in me. I'm feeling inspired to experiment, to try new things, and to keep learning and growing as an educator.
That's fantastic. And remember, the journey of philosophical exploration doesn't end when this deep dive is over.
Right.
It's a lifelong pursuit that can enrich your teaching, your relationships, and your own understanding of the world.
I'm so grateful for this opportunity to dive deep into educational philosophy with you. It's been eye-opening, thought-provoking, and incredibly inspiring.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. Remember, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this philosophical adventure. We hope you've gained some valuable insights that will spark your own journey of exploration and discovery in the world of education.